for joining. You guys know me both, so I'm Amethyst. For those who are watching the recording, I'm so glad that you guys could jump on. I know it's hard with our families because we're always home all together, right? So anyway, my name is Amethyst Thomas, and I was asked to come to you and share with you about how we can help protect our families and our kids from kind of the dangers that loom on the internet, as well as the fact that we're on our screens so much more than normal because of shelter in place and because of distance learning. And so I put together this 3-part webinar series to help educate each parent who is uniquely experiencing distance learning and uniquely experiencing shelter in place, so that we can kind of be ahead of the curve. Since this is an unprecedented event, we couldn't really be ahead, right? We couldn't know what was going to happen. We couldn't know that we were going to have our kids be on screens all the time. And so we're all kind of just scrambling, like, how do we handle this change, right? So I'm going to come, last week, it was the first of a 3-part series, and I was able to share some tips and some tricks and some expert advice. And so this week I'll review it just real quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and share some more information. And Lyon, I know you asked for the recording for the first one, and I am working with somebody to get that uploaded to my YouTube channel. So I'll get that out to you as soon as I figure out that tech part of it. And then you can catch up on that as well. So what I want to, let's see, you can also go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat bar as I'm going along, and I'll refer back to that chat bar at the end and make sure that I answer those questions if I'm able to. And if I'm not, then I will get back to you for the next time, or I'll reach out to you personally if I don't have the answer offhand. And so what I wanted to share, I'm going to share with you my screen here. I have a lot of things open here, so okay, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm excited. So you guys all know my family. This is my family. I worked with Teen Esteem for 17 years. And during that time of working for that nonprofit, I became kind of the expert guru on this topic. Nothing I ever thought I would get into or would be the person to come and talk to about it. Basically, I'm just a mom, just like the rest of you guys who've spent a lot of time researching this. And because I have older kids, I was thrown into the fireplace a little bit sooner than the rest of you on the screen. And so I'm just a few steps ahead of you. What I want to start by talking about, what I normally start off in my talk, if you've heard me in person, is the tools of the trade. And so basically, we need to really be paying attention to our kids and their friends and what they're into. And this is a little bit unique with shelter in place, right? Because now things are more popular, like Zoom, right? Like we're right here on Zoom. Our kids may have never been on, my kids had never been on Zoom prior to shelter in place. And now it is like, something that they talk about, like everybody in the world does Zoom, right? Because they're doing choir on Zoom and school on Zoom and like everything, piano on Zoom. It's hilarious, right? It's totally changed our world. But we also need to pay attention to what Netflix shows their friends are watching, or when they can go back into the regular world, what apps their friends are talking about, what how many of them have cell phones, how many of them have a computer in their bedroom, those types of things. We really need to pay attention to their surroundings. And then 2, we need to have awareness. And awareness really comes in exactly what you guys are doing right here, right now, is you are leaning in and saying, okay, what is happening in our culture right now? What can I do to help protect my kids and keep them safe right now? And so you're diving in and you're getting a little bit more information, which is exactly what we all need to be doing as parents, as we are leaning into parenting. And then 3rd is just training. And so you are receiving training right now, but the real training comes in where you go ahead and talk to your own kids about what you have learned in an age-appropriate way, so that you can really challenge them to step up and be the person that you want them to be in the face of risk and in the face of temptation, right? Because we talked last week about how kids are curious and how that is normal. We were curious as well, but we didn't have the world of the internet at our fingertips the way they do. And so their curiosity can take them places that is dangerous, and people can find them in a different way than we could have been found when we were kids. And so these are kind of the tools of the trade that we're going to talk about, and that I really want you to take with you and implement in your homes and share with your friends what you learn. So what I want to talk about, I didn't talk about a lot last week, was this idea of these devices being addictive. And so if you read what's on the screen here, you can see that actually screens are considered a form of digital drug, which is really kind of scary. And the reason why I didn't bring it up last week was because I really wanted to, I don't want anybody to feel scared or overwhelmed, even though it is an overwhelming and a scary situation. What I was able to bring to you from the experts last week was that basically they said, put away any sort of guilt, because right now is it's just such an unprecedented time. Our kids have to be on screens for school. They have to be on screens to get their homework done. They have to be on screens to do all these other things. And because we're realizing how social, well, some of us know, I'm looking at Lyon, some of us know that our kids are so social and they need to have all of this social outlet. And we want to encourage that, right? Whether they're doing fun things with their friends online, or you're doing a Zoom call with your family, or church, or whatever it is. We want to encourage the social aspect that can only come through screens right now. So I love that the experts were saying, don't feel guilt, right? And then what we used to do was we used to look at screens from a perspective of quantity, right? We looked at the amount of time, like the American Academy of Pediatrics gives us specific times that each age group should we should be spending on their screens, right? And that's what my presentation typically would cover. Now we are looking at it from a different perspective. Instead of quantity, we're looking at quality. So the experts last week were sharing with us how, if it has to do with relationships, or it has to do with learning, or it has some sort of value, or is helping us sit next to them and have some conversation about some Disney movie we're watching, about morality and what kind of choices that they would have made in that situation, then those are quality type screen experiences, right? And so I like that differentiation. But at the same time, I wanted to address the fact that there truly is an addictive quality to these screens. So we do have to find the right balance. And so the expert information that I read today that I wanted to share with you was really fascinating. And it basically just talked about, and I'm going to send you the link to this afterwards so you can read it on your own. But basically was that because of the neurotransmitters that are going on in our brain and the dopamine that's released every time we're on some sort of satisfying screen, such as social media, such as video games, any sort of thing that brings your kids satisfaction or ourselves, dopamine is released into our brain. And so there's such a thing as digital binging, right? We've heard about like Netflix binge watching, that type of thing, but there's digital binging. And so the way to bypass that, because we're on screen so much, is to differentiate find the difference between those things that are major dopamine rush versus the low dopamine rush. A low dopamine rush might be like reading a book on a screen, right? Versus like a high impact, crazy, wild, and exciting video game would be high dopamine rush, right? And so the experts say, find the difference, help your kids decide what the difference is, and make sure they're having 1 hour of dopamine rush, for example. And then if they're having 1 hour of dopamine rush, then they choose the next hour needs to be off of that dopamine rush and finding something else, hopefully something that's non-screen, like running around outside, playing with their brother, reading a book, right? Making Legos. And then if they need to get back on the screen and they need to have, and they choose to have a dopamine rush screen experience, that's okay. But you need to train them to then go back. And so the reason why is because it adversely does affect our brain the way the screen is saying. And so we do have to take that seriously, not to be fear-based, but just to be aware that while we can't avoid screens at this time, we can help them decide the quality while we can't really totally control the quantity. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll send you that link so you guys can read it, and the experts will explain it a little bit better. But I wanted to share that with you because that's kind of fascinating. What I also wanted to share with you is there's some news in the media right now that talks about, I'm going to stop my share for just a sec, that talks about great news. How many of you use Netflix in your house? Okay, I know that Netflix is a big deal. That's kind of the, you know, we all wish we had stock in Netflix right now, right? And Zoom. So with Netflix, they have really, really, really poor parental controls. I have actually called them and talked to them about it. I've been super disappointed, and good news, right in time, they have established new parental controls on Netflix. So I'm giving them a round of applause. I'm really pleased that they're taking responsibility and doing the right thing, because so many people and so many families and kids are spending time on them. So I'm going to send you a link on how you can set up those parental controls, but that's really, really great news. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew that you can now choose the types of TV shows and movies that your kids can watch. You can manage their profiles individually, and you can create a profile with the Netflix Kids, and then you can choose the titles that you want them to see or that you don't want them to see. And so I have all the steps here, and I'm going to email them to you when we're off the call, so you can do that when you are off here. Okay, so that's really great news. And then last week I gave you a link that allowed you to get involved with something through Covenant Eyes. And this week I'm going to give you a link that is through Common Sense Media. Common Sense and Covenant Eyes are two of my favorite ways of keeping abreast of this situation that's ever changing. I also love a whole bunch of them, but those are the two I'm going to refer to today. And so Common Sense Media is offering, this is really cool, they offer a full day's schedule of lessons, activities, and more. And I know that might sound like I am not interested in that because my kids are doing school all day and it feels overwhelming, but you can kind of pick and choose where you feel like if maybe they aren't being as stimulated with school, maybe they're not as challenged. I know that my daughter is spending quite a bit of time on school, but it gives some really cool tips on some podcasts that they can listen to, that you guys can listen to as an audible like story, some outdoors activities and tips. And sometimes I think we just need some ideas, right? Because it feels like Groundhog Day, right? Does anybody else feel like, oh, we're doing this again today? So I'm going to send you that link. And I love that people are coming out with great things that we can do to stay active and on screens, making them full of quality and not just focusing on the quantity. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Last week, we talked about 10 things that you can do to help protect your kids online. And I only talked about 5 of them in detail. And so we're going to talk about the other 5 here today. So one was set up parental controls on any device your child uses. And so we talked about how to do that on any Apple device. And so again, if you weren't on the call, I can get you the recording where I will show you how to do that. And that is great because it crosses over to the iPad and the iPod. And then today we're going to talk about the Android. So do any of you guys happen to have an Android? No. Do you, Lyon? Do you have an Android? No. And I don't know if you do, Christina. I can't see your face. Maybe say in the chat bar. But I'm going to share with that a little bit, because prior to this, the Android didn't have any protections, which was really sad. And people would get really frustrated with me as if it was my fault. But now they do. And so we're going to talk about that just for a sec. And so I'll get you that video so you can see that if you missed it. And then we want to disable the internet on any device that your child uses. And so I showed you how to do that through really easily to get Safari off of any of your Apple devices. And so if you are unable to take the internet off, or if you don't want to, then a filter is going to be super important. And so we're going to talk about that too. One of the things we didn't talk about was to disable location services on all devices. And the reason why this is really important is because if they're using the device, whether it's their own or yours, and they're taking a picture of themselves. And I know most of you guys have younger kids, so hopefully they're not posting anything to social media at this point, but they will be soon. As you probably all know, they are not supposed to be on social media until they're 13 years old. And that is to help keep them safe. And because, well, let's be real, they aren't really developmentally able to make good decisions till they're 25, but the people that be say that 13 would be the right age. So anyway, if they're taking a picture of themselves, for example, in their bedroom, and they're posting that on a social media source, somebody who's out there, like a predator who has poor intentions, could actually not only find the location of your house, but they could find the location of your child's bedroom where they took that photo. Now, if you disable location services on your device, that would not be able to happen. So that's a super simple change that you can do through settings on your phone as well. 4, I talked about this last week, keep all computers and tablets in a common area. I think it was you, Christina, who was asking, like, what do I do about that when I have many people in the house and we need to have some quiet time, right? Because somebody needs to be on a Zoom call for the class and there's another kid running around. Like, how do I do that? Well, obviously, in a situation like that, you can't, but you don't want them to be in their room purposeless with a device, if that makes sense. So if they have to do school in their bedroom because they need some quiet from their younger siblings, that totally makes sense, or from their adults, right, who are also working from home. But obviously a filter is what's going to also help you with that. So last week I said, for me, what I like the most is it's called Circle by Disney. It has $99 and it protects your entire house. So even kids who come in your house, which isn't happening right now, but when the world gets back to normal, when they bring their phone into your house, it becomes under your jurisdiction, basically. And it's $99 one-time fee, which is really cool. So it's kind of like an Alexa, right? So that's a great way to do it. Or if you or your spouse is techie, there's something called OpenDNS that they can just set up for your own house within your router. And then you can also go through your internet provider. Every internet provider has parental controls that are available to you that you probably don't even know about, just like you don't know that it's available to you on your phone, on your iPhone, but they're all there. Or you can get my list of like lots of other options. But the best thing for each family to do is to make sure there is some sort of filter device, because the reality is it's not a matter of if your kids are going to see something inappropriate, it's when. Okay. Next is to change all your device passwords. So there's a good chance that your kids know your password because you've been handing them your phone for years when they're in the grocery cart and they're little and it's time to play games and they just open it up. So this would be a good time for you to change that password so they cannot access your phone, your iPad, your tablet, your computer without your permission. So for example, Charlotte comes to me every morning. It's time to get on school, at 9:30, and I log in. So she cannot just do that on her own. And so that would be kind of an example of that. And so there's lots of different ways through the Apple in particular. I see that we all have those devices. There's something called Family Share, where, for example, if they have their own device and they want to get the cupcake game, it's gonna send you a message that says, "Mom, can I get the cupcake game?" And you can just click yes through Family Share, and you don't have to go do the whole password thing. So that's one option too. But you want it to be in your control, right? Because you're the boss. You own all of these devices. These are adult devices, even though your kids are going to try to tell you that they're not. And so the passwords are something that you need to own, not your kids. And then you want to check your privacy settings on all of the apps. So some of them have privacy settings that are really easy. Some of them don't. Like, for example, they're limited. For example, Instagram, there are some privacy settings where you can say that you have to people have to send you a friend request or not, but there's no filter for like the Explore tool, for example. There's no parental controls that you can set up on there for you to limit what they see. Okay, and then 7, don't allow devices behind closed doors, which is kind of what we just talked about. And number 8, create device-free zones. We talked about this last week. For those who weren't on the call, this would be a good conversation to have at the dinner table tonight or tomorrow. What areas in our life do we want to agree that we won't have screens? And that is a really beneficial conversation to have. And number 9, determine what kind of filter you'll use to protect your entire family, which we discussed. And then check the history on all devices. And I was telling people yesterday, unfortunately, we live in a world where now there is private browsing that you can choose. But the thing that you want to know is that when you check the history on all the devices, if the history is cleared and there's no history, then that's a red flag, right? And that is a good invitation to have a conversation about that. 1, we don't erase history, and we're going to talk about that in our online family contract in a minute. And 2, what are you looking at that you're erasing, right? So that's a really good thing to start looking at. Like, put it in your calendar once a week to make sure you're checking that history. So speaking of the online family contract, this is the one that I developed based on looking at dozens of different contracts that I found online. And I just cut and copied and I created what I liked. Now I will send this to you when we're all done. And what you can do is cut and copy what you think is best for your family, because we all have different aged children and we all have different values and feelings about all this. And there's no right or wrong, right? You just want to find what's best for you. And so what you would do with this contract is you would print it out and you would sit together as a family and you would go through each line item and certainly, give an opportunity to have explanation or ask any, for the kids to ask any questions. And at the end, you will have them sign it. You're going to sign it and they're going to sign it. And basically they're signing saying, we understand what the rules are in this house and in this family. And I understand that if I choose to break them, then I choose to accept the consequences, right? It's parenting 101, right? This is something that we all do in all other areas. But what needs to happen, what's unique in this, is that we kind of just assume that our kids know how we feel about this. We might assume that they know what the rules are, and the reality is we probably just have not even talked to them about some of these topics. And some of them you may not be ready to, depending on the age of your children, and that's okay. And that's why you're going to pick and choose which ones you want to have. But it's a really good idea for you to do this, and I would encourage you to do it like in the next week or so before we come back together next Wednesday. And I'd love to hear how it went with your family, because what happens is that you post it in a public place. And so when they break, and it's probably, again, when, not if, when they break one of these rules, you could say, oh man, that's such a bummer that you shared our personal and family information with somebody online. Remember how it says that right here in our contract, that really puts our whole family at risk. So there will be a consequence for you to do that, since you did that. And let's talk again why we don't do that, right? And so parenting 101 is that we need to follow through, right? But this is just really good communication. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Yes, Lyon, go ahead and unmute yourself, hon.
Thanks for this, Amethyst.
You're
I
welcome.
don't know how to parent my child, but I do believe that the consequences should be as relevant as possible to whatever the offense or action was. And so I'm wondering if you also have suggestions about appropriate consequences related to this.
Great question. Yeah, I'm all for that. Yeah. And that's when we have to get really creative, right? And go, okay, what would make sense? So in that scenario, basically, if that had happened on your home computer, then perhaps they would have restriction from using the home computer for a week, right? If it was something that happened, it gets a little bit harder and easier when they get older. When they get their own devices, it becomes like the tool for consequences, right? Because it's like their heartbeat. And if you take it away from them, it's like you're pulling their heart out of their chest, right? But that is their motivation. And so if it was something that was done on their phone, if they were looking at something inappropriate, if they were talking with a stranger, or whatever, you know, then it would make sense that they either lose their phone or they lose the privilege of using that app if it was through an app, you know. So yeah, I mean, you know, call me when it happens and we'll brainstorm together. But I would definitely say that it has to do with something with the device being used. Yeah, absolutely. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's a really good thing that I would love for you guys to really implement in your homes. So we're going to talk a little, I'm not going to talk much because I know no one on the screen has the Androids, but I'm going to say it real quick just so that you know if you have, you might have a spouse who has an Android, you might have a mom or a sibling or a friend that you're going to sit next to one day when you can sit back on the baseball field with somebody or the soccer field. But it really is great news to see that now Android does have these parental controls, but it does have you do have to have an app. So if you are on your iPhone and you want to ignore me for a minute and you haven't done this, you would go to settings and then general and then screen time, and that's how you set this up. With the Android, you have to have an app versus just going through settings. So this app is called the Digital Wellbeing app, but it's really exciting that it's here because there was no way to protect an Android before unless you like went through and found a filter like we talked about before. So I'm just going to show you, they have the dashboard, do not disturb, notifications, and wind down. And this is what it looks like, which is really cool. So the first one is where you see the digital well-being here. And that's where you're going to install it. That's what it looks like. And then once you install it, it shows you how many hours a day you've spent on your device. So in this situation, 3 hours and 22 minutes. And it shows you how much on each thing. So Facebook versus Netflix, YouTube, etc. And so what's interesting, this is really good for us to know about ourselves, but it's really also great for us to see for our kids once they have their own devices so we can talk to them about how much time they're spending on each area and platform. And this is funny because this came up with Noah the other day, my 18-year-old, and he's like, I don't have that on my phone. And sure enough, he does. And we found out, and he was teasing me and I was teasing him. And I'm like, yeah, I know I'm on my phone all the time, but it's also where I do my job. I make money off my phone. You were kind of like laughing at each other. But it's really good for everybody just to be aware, because even for ourselves, we might be like, oh my goodness, I spent that much time on what, So this is really cool to see that. And then the third image, again, just breaks down on the days, how much time we're spending on each day, which is kind of interesting. And here, YouTube, 41 minutes. And the last one is really great because this allows you, and we can do all of this on an iPhone too, but it says the app is paused here. So you can set up YouTube to only allow you to be on it for an hour, for example. So this is a really great parenting tool because you guys are like working from home. You are, being a mom to, to more than one kids. Your life is busy, and you can so easily allow your kids to be on YouTube for over an hour and just miss it, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all these other things. And so if you have this set up, and again, you can do this through an Apple device too, it will stop your child and say, you have spent an hour on YouTube. It's time to take a break, right? So it monitors that for you, which is really cool. And if you don't know how to do this on your iPhone, let me know and I'll walk you through it. It's actually, and I can even stay on afterwards for those who want to see that. Okay, so that's exciting that that's now available. And before we get to questions, I went through that pretty quickly because nobody had that. Okay, I just want to make sure I covered all these things. Before I go into questions, I just want to share just what we're going to look forward to next week that I'm going to cover, okay? So I'm going to stop my share here. We are going to, next week will be my last week, and we are going to talk about more filters and ways that we can protect our actual computers. So we've now talked about how to protect our iPhones and our Androids, and then next week we'll talk about our computers. So on Mac and a PC, inside the actual computer. You can set up controls outside of even investing in a filter. So that's kind of cool. And then we're also going to talk about, there's other devices like your TV and your video games, and like every screen that you can imagine, you can put parental controls on. And some of them are limited. Like I said before, there was almost nothing you do with Netflix, but now you can, which is great news. And again, I'll send that to you later. And then I'll share more updates and tips from experts. And then we're going to talk about, we've already now talked about 10 things you can do this week to help protect your children. So that list, you should have all gotten in an email already. And except maybe you, Colleen, and I'll add you to the list. And then next week, we'll talk about 10 things that you can do this coming week. So we did the 10 that were kind of like the easier ones. And then there's 10 more that kind of take an investment of your time. Not that these ones don't, but there's 10 more things, because basically there is a lot. It's like an extra job. And that's why so many people's phones and computers aren't protected, because it's like, when am I going to find time to do that? But now during shelter in place might be just the right time for us to do that. And invite a friend, and we'll have question and answer as well. So I wanted to try to keep this shorter because I know it's dinner time for everybody, but please unmute yourself and let me know if you have any questions. And if you don't have questions and you would like me to show you about how to set up the parental controls on the iPhone, I can do that too, because we have time. So go ahead and unmute yourself and let me know if you have any questions, or if you have any comments or just like observations that you're making with your kids being on screens. I would love to hear just kind of how the pulse of what you're experiencing right now.
Are you there?
Yes.
I think now it's interesting because the kids are doing so much, like you said, on the computers, and their Zoom calls aren't at the same time. And I find that after the calls, they're staying on and trying to do homework with the other classmates. And it's hard to monitor all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that Zoom has specifics of, like I hear things in the news about how it can be kind of breached and people have gotten in. And I think the teachers have tried to help with that, but it's very interesting because it's a completely new system for us,
Yes.
and they're on it,
Mm-hmm.
I can't really regulate it per se. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. And that was one of the things I was going to bring up. You probably have seen that on the news, that Zoom has had quite a few breaches. And so it's actually causing other platforms to skyrocket, like Google Hangouts and a couple other ones are skyrocketing because of it. But I think Zoom, what they were able to do was now they require a meeting ID and password, which I've always bypassed because it's easier to not have those things, but that is really good. So if your child is going to be on a Zoom and you're not going to be like present, I would communicate to that person who is sending out the Zoom link, can we please make sure we have a password? Because you may have heard, did you hear what happened like on the breach that was on the news? It's like in the middle of a professional meeting and then pornography like came on the screen. Yeah. So, I mean, that would be so devastating for our kids, to see, especially in a classroom environment or something. But I think that's why, at least in our school, why the teachers have now made it password protected. But
so
yeah.
it's safe with the password.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to confirm. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, I don't have any questions, but Amethyst, I was just going to say thank you for doing these. It's helpful to hear the information while I'm cooking up dinner, and just make sure that there aren't holes in what we're doing, that we could, to make it a better system.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming on. I know this is a hard time. I wanted to reach people who, are working from home and can't do that during the day. But there will be always holes, Christina. I'm sorry to tell you, as you know, as a parent, there's holes in everything we do. But my whole philosophy is trying to be proactive instead of reactive. We will have to react in so many situations, but if we can try to be proactive as often as possible, then we can say, well, I really did try my best, right? I did jump on those calls with the Amethyst. I did read those links. I was praying for my kids. I did everything that I could, right? But we can't control it all. And they're little humans with their own, decision making, and they're gonna get it. They can get around anything that they want to, but we can do our best to set them up for safety. Yeah.
So Tavia is 10 and she's very social and loves to dance, and she has discovered TikTok.
Hmm.
And it's actually the first social media site that she has engaged with, really. But she's nowadays, when she gets electronic time, that's what she runs to. So I don't
Hmm.
know if maybe it needs a separate session or something, but if there's anything that I should know, I mean, I quickly tried to get in gear and ask her to show me who she's following or who's following her. And she did have folks who I think were following her. And so I guess I just don't know, like, are there some immediate things that I should keep in mind in general about social media, or specifically about TikTok if you feel like you're familiar with it?
Yeah, it is like, it is booming, it is the place. And, quite frankly, you and I would have probably loved it when we were her age too, right? Like, because we love to sing and we love to dance and so like everything, it has some great things about it, right? And then some not great things about it, right? Everything that was intended for good gets kind of skewed for harm. So I think it's awesome. I could see her, owning the stage for TikTok. But the biggest thing is you do want to check the privacy settings. And so there are settings that say that anyone can follow her, anyone can find her and follow her, or she can have it set up on I'm not sure if it's called friends only or what the verbiage is on that. I would have to go back and check. But what you want it is so that not anyone can find her, right? It's only friends that she accepts that can follow her, because this is a super dangerous place for child predators, right? Because a lot of the girls in particular are doing really like sassy, sexy songs and movements and wearing clothing that is, you know, attractive to somebody who is out there looking, to be, because the sad thing is this is where the predators are. I did listen to a news broadcast with a man who had just gotten out of jail. And he said, wow, I came out of jail and it was like social media just made my job so much easier. He's like, I wish I wasn't like this. And he said, but I just am. And he said, it's so easy for me to target these kids. I mean, I heard him say that like with his mouth and his face. And I was like, oh my gosh, And so that was even before TikTok. And so I feel like TikTok even invites that in a little bit more. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm just saying that, yes, take the extra steps to make sure that it's set up to private, because as long as she's only being followed by her friends, it's probably just going to be just fine. And I know she's not doing, things that are suggestive, but you just don't want eyes on her that you don't know who those eyes belong to. So that's my biggest suggestion. And then also, just as far as her scrolling the feed, that's the other caution, right? Is that she may see things that you may be uncomfortable with. And so my biggest piece of advice every time I give this talk is to really establish a filter for the heart. And this is the harder conversation. This is the longer conversation. This is the conversation that has to keep happening over and over again, which basically says, if you are looking at a screen or a phone or a TikTok video, or somebody puts a screen in front of your face at school or, whatever, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable, that is inappropriate, then I'm going to encourage you to turn away, from the screen. And I would like for you to tell me, and you're not going to be in trouble. I just want to be able to process what you saw. Right. And then really just, if you have some sort of moral compass, right, talk to them. If you have a faith background, you want to talk to them about that, and how, is that in line with what our family believes, what your faith background teaches. Those are the things that they're going to be exposed to on the screens, right? So having that deeper conversation so that their compass inside of them is going to steer them away, right? Because the reality is, we are visual people, right? Especially males, but also, females as well. So if you see something that's enticing, it's going to be hard to turn away from. It's going to be easier to stop the scroll and be like, whoa, what's that? Like, that's not something I've seen before, right? And then the curiosity will kick in, the dopamine will release, and then they'll go back for that image again, right? And so that's kind of the danger that comes with that. It's just a natural physiological response. And so we have to train them, and we talked about this with the training at the beginning, to turn away. And so some of that really is just looks like, okay, let's do some, my pediatrician always talked about this. It's really important to do like acting it out, right? Do role playing. Okay. And this was before the internet. This could be with anything, right? But this is how it used to go down with Noah when he was little. So his best friend had a computer in an upstairs room. And so his friend would always say, hey, let's go upstairs and play, you know, in the office on my, you know, dad's computer. And I would have to teach him to go, okay, what happens when he asks you to do that? And he'd say, I said, what else do you like to do at his house? Oh, we like to play basketball in the backyard. You know, we like to play catch in the front yard. And I said, okay, so you say, hey, you know, that's okay. I don't want to play on the computer. Let's go play basketball in the backyard. And he's like, and then the kid says, no, I want, you know, let's go up. This is fun. This is a fun game. I want to do this. And then Noah would say, no, I really don't want to. Like, let's go. We can either play catch in the front yard or we can play basketball in the backyard. Which one do you want to choose? And so I would like literally walk him through this, right? And this kind of role play changes every single time, you know, they flip a new age, right? Or they're exposed to something new. But that's what I would do, Lyon, is really, one, make sure you know how to set up the privacy settings on there. And the links that I send you today, Common Sense Media will show you how to do that. You can do it just a real quick, easy YouTube search, like how to set up parental controls on TikTok. And you'll see like lots of great tutorials on how to do that. And then two, talk to her about what it is that is okay with you, right? As you're going to be thinking about the online family contract. So that might be something you want to add to that. When viewing TikTok, you are only allowed to follow people who we know, and only people can follow you who mom knows, right? Like that might be your rule. And then when faced with someone's information that you don't know, that is startling, that you think probably wouldn't be beneficial for you, I want you to tell me, or if that's how you feel, right? So like just walk her through this and just over communicate so that you can kind of reach every nuance that may happen. And you won't, right? Because something always comes up. You're going to be like, I didn't even know, right? And that's really how I got into this, right? Is that I thought I was getting an innocuous device. It was going to be an alternative to gaming, and it ended up not. I didn't realize, oh no, this has texting and messaging and the internet, you know, like this was, you know, 7 years ago. This was like all so new to us, right? We had no idea. And the thing that's really fascinating is that our kids are digital natives, right? They know no world without mom with a phone in her back pocket, right? Without mom and dad both working on the computers, without the ability to, TikTok is newer, but you know, any of these types of entertainment on this device. But where I want to encourage parents is that also that makes us really unique. We can be featured in the history books as the first parents in history who have had to parent kids who have only grown up with this, right? And that makes it super interesting because you can't call your mom and say, hey, mom, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with Tavia loving TikTok? What should I do to protect her? She's going to be like, what's TikTok? Right? Like there's no help to be had, right? We're all figuring this out together. So, and that's why I speak on this so much, is because there's nobody really talking about it. Everyone's experiencing it, but there's no, you know, platform to really talk about it because it's ever evolving, right? So you can imagine every single time I have this talk, I have to spend so much time preparing because everything is always changing, right? And the FBI even says that they are 6 months behind predators and teenagers. The FBI says that. So just to show ourselves a little bit of grace, you know, we're just doing the best that we can. But it doesn't mean that we aren't going to show up and we're not going to use those tools that we talked about of, you know, attention, awareness, and training. Does that help? Okay, good. Hi, Erica. I see we have a new friend in here. I can't see your face and I know we can't hear you, but I'm glad you're here. Hi. So we're just finishing up, Erica. We're just having a little bit of time of Q&A. Do you guys have any other questions before we sign off? No? Okay. Well, I so appreciate you guys. Oh, Lyon, go ahead.
Sorry, I just didn't, do you have a list of recommendations of starter phones for tweens or?
Well, your kids may not like me, but I am a total fan of the flip phone. There is no reason that I don't think. So this is the way we did it. They would always say, when do I get a phone? I said, well, when you need one. Like you're either with me or you're with like a coach. Like, when do you need one? Why then had forgot Noah at a baseball practice. And I was like, oh, I guess that would have been helpful if you could have called me and you weren't stranded at a school, until I realized, where's my son? Oh, I forgot him. So he got one like in the 6th grade, a flip phone. And so did Haley. And they could call and they could text. And that was all they needed to do for junior high. And yes, they were one of the only, if not only, child with a flip phone, even at a private Christian school. But let me tell you, and I think they would tell you this now that they're older as well, because they're 18 and 21, it saved them so much drama to have that flip phone in junior high, because the kids just had these huge text string messages, like every single person in the class. And sometimes they would be like, what'd you get for number 4? Who's coming to the dance? I mean, and then there's like 42 bing, 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 right? And they're trying to do their homework, and the distraction was like so overwhelming. The other parents would tell me it was just so awful. And then I didn't let them get on social media until after they graduated 8th grade. So I let them get Instagram, and I gave them a used smartphone when they graduated 8th grade. So that was how we did it. This doesn't mean that's the right way. That's just how we did it. You guys may have heard there's something called Wait Till 8th. And this is something that you can, if you feel strongly about it, it's basically you can sign it with your kids' classmates. So you would like go out to Tave's class and say, hey, would you guys be interested in all agreeing that our kids don't get a smartphone until they're in 8th grade? And then that way the whole class has signed it, or partial part of the class, like Colleen and Charlotte's class, some of them have signed it, so that when Charlotte comes back to me and says, Mom, I'm the only one without a smartphone, I can say, nope, that's not true. There's at least 15 other people in the family, of the families in the class who have signed this, and we're all going to wait till 8th grade. And then it's not like you're the only bad guy, right? It makes it like, okay, that if Caitlin doesn't have one and I don't have one, then it doesn't feel as like, as isolated. But I would just say you still do have to pay. It's not as super cheap as you would think to have a flip phone, but keep that one, have Tavia take care of it. And then that will be, Ton's later on. And again, I know I am, maybe people might say I'm crazy to say that, but honestly, the drama that comes, and then just all the things we just talked about, the dangers that can come when you open it up to having all of these apps and to having Safari and all that kind of stuff, that's really what I want to avoid for your kids. I want to delay the inevitable of the things that they're going to see, right? And that they're going to be tempted by. And the other thing is that school has to take priority, right? And if they have access to what distracts us, right? I mean, this is super distracting, right? I want my kids to be focusing on school, right? I want them to be outside. I want them to go play with their siblings. And if they have the moment, let me just warn you, the moment you let them have this, you lose them. You truly do, because they have a whole nother world, like on this other side of this, that you have limited control over, and they want to be with that. Right? They establish a relationship with that. That's their number one, versus with you, right? So just put it off as long as you can. And again, they can text and they can call, right? And that's awesome, right? And yes, you will have to teach them the principle that I had to teach my kids, like you're just going to have to be okay with being different. That was definitely like our number one principle. They didn't always like that, but I'm like, that's just the reality, if we're always just trying to keep up with the Joneses or trying to compare, like everybody else has this, everybody else has this, well, that's just exhausting, right? That's just a never ending story. So you can blame it on me. You can say, Mrs. Thomas said that Noah and Charlotte had flip phones until they graduated the 8th grade. And that will be what it is for Charlotte as well. But I'm sure there's other ones. But the reality is, if there's a smartphone, no matter what it is, Lyon, if it has access to internet and apps, they're all really the same. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Anything else, you guys? Well, thanks for joining me tonight. You guys take care. It's so good to see your faces. And I have this recorded as soon as my friend Carrie is going to help me get these all uploaded. And then I will let you guys know. And Colleen, I'll add you to my email list. And so if you're not on it already, and then you'll get all of the links so you can read the articles that I mentioned today. Okay. Thank you guys for caring about your kids and your families. It's great to see you tonight. Have a great night.
Thank you, Amethyst.
You're welcome. Bye.